Hi y'all. So my presentation is going to be about sober queer spaces. Simply because in the LGBTQ community, we definitely need more of those. So first I'm going to define what would be in fact a sober queer space. A sober queer space would be one that does not involve alcohol. Another way would it would be sober is that it would not involve drugs, including marijuana. Some examples of these sober queer spaces would be sober queer dance nights, coffee shop meetups, wellness events, game nights, and creative workshops. Here are some alarming statistics about substance use among the LGBTQ population. LGBTQ adults are twice as likely to have a substance use disorder among their LGBTQ peers, and that's just because LGBTQ adults they tend to have a lot more stress when it comes to discrimination, stigma. They're also trying to navigate family dynamics and relationship dynamics on top of that. Transgender individuals report the highest rate of alcohol and drug abuse among their LGBTQ peers. Transgender individuals, I believe, probably have the highest rate of alcohol and drug abuse among the LGBTQ population, just because not only they're dealing with the stigma and the discrimination part, but they're also dealing with trying to transition possibly, and just the dysphoria of feeling as though they were born the wrong gender possibly, and so that takes a toll a lot on a person. Also, many of them are disowned by their parents, so a lot of times they're just forced out into the streets, and unfortunately, a lot of times because of this, they may engage in things like prostitution in order to survive. And unfortunately, drugs and alcohol play a big part in all of that. LGBTQ youth are twice more likely to use drugs and alcohol rather than their non LGBTQ peers. I believe that this is because as an LGBTQ youth, you're really most likely just coming out. So if you're coming from a family where that's not really allowed, you're trying to navigate how to really work through it with your parents while still in their household, and at the same time you're trying to still find yourself. You're also most likely just trying to start dating and such, and that's a lot when you have parents that don't necessarily accept you and you're still living in their house. Also, you're most likely just trying to find like friends and stuff that will accept you, and sometimes that involves drugs and alcohol. Around 20 to 30% of LGBTQ struggle with substance misuse compared to 9% of the general population. Um, Again, that's just because with LGBTQ population, we tend to deal with a lot more discrimination and stigma compared to non-LGBTQ peers. Sober environments help reduce risky behavior and promote well-being. Sober environments are just going to naturally promote well-being mentally and physically, but it's also going to reduce risky behavior that oftentimes come with taking part in alcohol and drugs. Stress from discrimination and stigma leads to higher rates of substance use and mental health issues in the LGBTQ population. Again, this is just because many LGBTQ people struggle with substance use and mental health issues because they're dealing with the stigma and discrimination, but also a lot of times there's a lot of trauma that goes into coming out and being LGBTQ. So now I'm going to go over why sober queer spaces are important to the LGBTQ community. So the first reason is because sober queer spaces provide safety and inclusion. So believe it or not, many members of the LGBTQ community are sober by choice. Some members of the LGBT community are in active recovery. So this is another reason why a sober queer space would be very important. For some members of the LGBT community, bars and clubs can feel unsafe, especially since the Pulse nightclub shooting. Sober spaces reduces pressure to indulge in alcohol or drugs and creates a feeling of a judgment-free zone. So just to touch up on some of these points, some members of the LGBTQ population community are in active recovery, so going to a bar or a club may not be an option for them. Ever since the Pulse nightclub shooting, there are some people that are part of the LGBTQ population that would not, prefer not to go to a bar or a club, especially if it is marketed as specifically as a LGBTQ bar or club. Sober spaces reduce pressure to indulge in alcohol or drugs. Obviously, like a queer coffee shop is going to be a lot less pressure than if someone were to go to a bar or a club. Some members of the LGBTQ community are actively healing from trauma that may be triggered by the use of alcohol or drugs. So this is another point as to why a sober queer space would be important, because many queer folks suffer from higher rates of trauma and mental health challenges. And to cope, many turn to alcohol or drugs or both. Sober spaces encourage healing, peer support, and reflection, and they encourage emotional wellness and peer support. So, for many LGBTQ people, they are actively trying to heal from trauma, whether it be family, um, just identity trauma, relationship trauma. So, because of that, many would actually benefit from going to just a sober space that are for queer people. um, it really does just help people with emotional wellness, and it really encourage others to also seek out peer support, and it really also encourages more emotional closeness and authenticity, which really in turn helps people heal from trauma. The next slide is going to be about how a sober queer space would be accessible for all queer folks. I think we all kind of forget that sometimes many queer folks are under 21. So even though someone's under 21, they still should be able to socialize with other queer people around who are around the same age as them. So a sober queer space would allows that for queer folks that are under 21 to still be able to socialize with people that are queer, that may have similar experience to them, that can emotionally connect with them on that level. Many queer folks are in recovery. So again, because there are many queer folks who are in recovery, a sober queer space really allows for them to still be able to socialize and go out and connect with other queer folks without the use of alcohol or drugs. Some queer folks are neurodivergent or disabled, so they would rather be in an environment that's more sensory friendly. There are many queer folks who are neurodivergent or disabled, and a bar or a club is not always the most sensory friendly place to be. So going to somewhere like a coffee shop or like a art studio would be a lot more sensory friendly to people who are neurodivergent but also queer, who would also want to socialize with other queer folks. Some queer folks are religious or cultural abstainers. Some queer folks are religious, so they may not want to go to a bar or a club, and that's okay too as well. The expansion of queer culture. This is another good point as to why sober queer spaces are indeed a really great and necessary asset to the LGBTQ population. LGBT culture, when a lot of people think of it, they think of it as, you know, a lot of nightlife themes, like a lot of bars and a lot of clubs. And queer culture should not be limited to that thinking. I would like people to more so see queer culture in a more expansive light. And I've seen this on social media as well, where people have said that, you know, they think that LGBT culture is limited to just a lot of parties and a lot of sexual craze parties and a lot of craziness. And there's nothing wrong with all that either, but definitely it would be nice to see queer culture be more expanded. So sober spaces allow for creativity within the culture, like spoken word events, art events are really a great way to put into this creativity, but still allow a sober queer space, because a lot of queer people do tend to be into art, educational workshops. Um, that's a really good event. Not only would that allow for networking, but that would also allow for just educating the public too about queer culture. Um, this again reframes the community as more than parties or bars. Again, parties and bars are great, but it by adding more sober queer spaces, this reframes the community as being much more than that. Um, More LGBTQ people are attending sober pride events and seeking alcohol free spaces as of 2021, which is really good. It shows a shift in the culture itself, and it shows a shift in attitudes as far as how people want to connect as a whole. Also, with the LGBTQ community and with sober queer spaces, it allows for real connection and belonging for queer folks. A lot of times, queer folks really are really trying to find that sense of belonging and that sense of connection. So, queer spaces, sober queer spaces, help facilitate that. Without alcohol and drugs, people tend to be more authentic in themselves, more open and present. So this is going to allow for more authentic one-on-one or personal connections, just personal meetups, one-on-one conversations. This is also especially great for newcomers in the community. For anyone that's just coming out and just starting to like trying to like go out to queer spaces, this is a great way to start off in an easygoing space where they're able to set a stable foundation in meeting new people and building relationships. This also helps build lasting friendships. More authentic interactions lead to more stable foundations, making the friendship more likely to be lasting. This also helps with many queer folks finding their chosen family. Again, many queer folks um, are disowned by their family. So a lot of times they are looking for friends that turn into family, and this becomes their chosen family. So emotional vulnerability allows for friendships to turn into feeling like family, allowing for queer folks, especially those that have been abandoned by their family, to have a chosen family, and a very stable dynamic within that chosen family. Queer spaces improve emotional expression and mental health. So without using alcohol and drugs, it really is going to it really improves how people express themselves emotionally and just how they end up feeling mentally after those interactions. So, in summary, sober queer spaces pretty much check off all the boxes as far as why they're really a great space for the queer community. They center safety, they center healing and choice. They include wider range of people because you're not only including people that may be interested in alcohol, but you're also including people that are not interested in alcohol. It lets queer culture exist beyond drinking culture, which is great because again, when people think of like the LGBTQ community, they tend to think of a lot of like bars and nightclubs, and this really shows and allows the queer community to exist beyond that stereotype, and encourage an authentic connection. Again, people tend to be more authentic when they're not using alcohol or drugs, and by encouraging authentic connection, you're encouraging emotional well-being and just really people developing better mentally and creating better long-lasting friendships and relationships. So, call to action. I think supporting more sober queer events is a great way to really kind of really start showing up more in the community as far as like showing that there are a lot of queer people that are interested in events that do not include alcohol or drugs. Be mindful of substance use when planning gathering. Really just ask the people in your group if they're okay with drinking or drugs, if you partake in any type of drug use. Also, just really be mindful of like if there is someone that in your group that's not okay with it, don't pressure them to try to join in on that. Ask local organizers to host inclusive alcohol free options. That's always a good way to also promote sober queer spaces. Asking popular organizers that organize a lot of LGBTQ events if they would be willing to host an event that does not include alcohol. Again, ask others other comfortability with alcohol use when hanging out. You always want to ask if you're in a group with people, ask what their comfortability is with being around alcohol because some people simply do not want to be around alcohol at all or simply can't because they're in recovery. So you always want to just be mindful of asking people what is their comfortability with that, and just celebrate and be queer together. At the end of the day, we're all queer. We're all just trying to have fun. But it's also good to be mindful that we can also have fun, not always indulging in alcohol, or going being at a bar or at a party. There's many ways, again, that I've just um, narrated where there can be lots of fun within the queer community that doesn't involve alcohol or drugs. And then these are my references right here.